Welcome to the Only Health Tech Podcast. Right here, delighted to have Dr. Boulogne with her 30 years of experience in Eastern medicine and acupuncture and other things. So, Dr. Pat, tell me about yourself and let me know what you have done in the last 30 years in the Eastern medicine field, acupuncture and herbal medicine.
Well, it's verging on the end of 3 decades, actually. And my experience is very vast because I have certification in sports medicine and have worked on elite teams. I've worked with the LPGA. My base training is as a chiropractor and had a practice on Cape Cod for 10 years. And then I moved to Boston and had a more private practice, focusing on, like things that people just weren't getting better on. They weren't getting better with their health. They weren't, they were getting, they look sick and nobody, millions of people don't know that they're sick, but a lot of people are sick and they're thinking those are just like, oh, I'm just getting old, and when you happen to see someone who's 80 years old that can bend over and touch or put their hands behind their heels, you're thinking something's wrong with what we're thinking about what health is and what health isn't. And so I have a vast background in that. I help with elite athletes and executives maintain and sustain their sustainability throughout the day and throughout their life so that they're waking up every day, hitting the ground running, and not feeling like, oh man, I got to go exercise. I got oh, what should I eat? It's not, when you get to the point where you understand how to fuel your engine, then you're not going to put, if you are a premium intaker of food, you're not going to put, low grade, bio, like, the other stuff that you would. It's like the same thing on your car. That's why they made all the cars, regular gasoline, which is good
Right.
because it doesn't cost as much, right? But the idea is the same. It's like if you have a premium engine, like a Ferrari, like so it's like high, or even a Mustang that's really souped up, you need to put premium gas in it, or it's not going to run well, and you're going to burn through your car in a very short period of time. It's the same thing. It's like John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 36th president or 34th president of the United States, said, all rising tides lift boats. Well, you better make sure that your boat doesn't have any holes, or because when that tide comes in, you're going to sink. And so, if you take that analogy for your health, that's how I approach health. It's just like, let's find out where the holes are at, and let's see what we can do to fix them and elevate your health, your mind, your body, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and socially. Because all those pieces make up who you are. And they have to be there in order for you to be able to be expressive of your environment.
So what do you think the food industry has contributed to our health system? A
Everything.
lot of people, yeah.
Everything.
Availability of food it has changed the world, but also we've had the first world problems of health problems regarding that. Back in the 1600s when they were growing the wheat, no one realized that there was that fungus that was growing in the wheat, and that's why they had all hallucinations and that kind of thing, but
Hmm.
no one knew about that type of stuff. So, what has Eastern medicine done to combat a lot of the natural stuff that we consume, and how has that been able to prevent first world health problems, diabetes, obesity, that kind of thing?
Well, diabetes and obesity and a lot of chronic illnesses, their disease start with what you put in your mouth. So making, good choices, whether it's Eastern medicine or Western medicine or the East or the West, there are ingredients and chemicals and pesticides, insecticides, and fungicides, cleaning utensils that you use in your house, like in solutions that you're ingesting because they're in your environment, which are altering. Some of them are estrogen disruptors. Most of them, cause cancer from long-term exposure. And so it's just like, stop using them and find a different solution. Don't use, the spray from Monsanto for the glycophosphates. You can make a simple solution with vinegar and water and Dawn, or any soap, actually,
Wow.
and it kills weeds, and it doesn't kill
Huh.
you. And you have to think about,
Okay.
if you're killing the spider, if you're killing, if you're putting, insecticides, on the food, if it's killing them, it's killing you.
Mm.
Think about it, because you're thinking like, oh, I can't stand that ant, or I can't stand that spider. Well, maybe what you're spraying on them, to kill them, you're also like inducing, an early death for yourself with long-term exposure. I mean, people have, Terminex, those kind of companies that come around, and get rid of people's houses that are infested with, rodents and things like that. So, you know, the bubonic plague was great for that because it all came from rat feces, right? And so,
Right.
and totally wiped out, tons of people on that type of, epidemic. But in Eastern, Eastern people, it's just like in acupuncture. When I learned about food and acupuncture, they look at different things too. They look at whether or not a food's hot or cold. So, for instance, ginger or basil is a hot food, and you want hot foods, in order to balance out and take care of like for instance, ginger for women who are pregnant prevent, it's just like it calms the fetus. But at the same time, and also they use it in Chinese, for eating, for in sushi, to kill microbes,
Interesting.
because it's hot. When I went and studied in China, I made sure every meal that I had a teaspoon of chili sauce. I mean, true one, not the stuff that you buy, that's all like, looks like it's kind of a more pink color than,
Right.
oil just the seeds, because I wanted to make sure I had enough heat in my body that if I ate anything there that was like, I'm not going to get sick. And I was the only person on my trip the whole time I was there that didn't get sick, you know.
Interesting.
And so, everyone else got, something at some point in time, some intestinal thing, and I just made sure the water that I drank, the food that I was eating, I looked at it like, so what is it that, if I didn't understand what I was eating, I didn't eat it.
Mm.
There was just like, oh, you want to try this? It's just like, what is it? Where did it come from? And I had those like inquiring mind questions. It was probably the visiting doctor that they didn't want to have, but I was the only person that was there, and I ate almost everything that everyone else ate. I did have one morning that my eggs were green,
Okay.
and I just went, I'm not eating these. I don't know what kind of eggs they were, but I'm not eating these. It's just like I followed my instinct on a lot of when I'm traveling like that. And then
Gotcha.
so, um, you know, the so there isn't really that much difference, but they use foods as medicine, and we should use foods as medicine also. So there's like there's a time to eat like white bean, and like those kind of things, so that you're for different things like how to support the body more, how to support digestion, how to support what nutrient you really need in order to be healthier. And
Yep.
likewise, you have to in the United States as opposed to being in Europe. If you look at it, if you go online and you look up at a European list of what foods are not, acceptable in the UK and in the ECU, you will see that we have a lot more ingredients and chemicals in our foods that we eat on a regular basis. I always
Right.
use the example of Heinz ketchup. If you go to
Mm.
England and you look at the ingredients in Heinz ketchup, you will see like maybe like there's 8 ingredients in total, something like that. You will see,
Tomato
you know,
paste,
yeah,
water.
something like that, and they probably put a little salt in it, and but and if you look at Heinz and ours, it's like people just naturally buy it. If you go to Trader Joe's and buy their organic ketchup, you would never eat Heinz ketchup ever again. It's a
Right.
totally different mother and father that produce that, and
Wow.
and so and looking at labels, people have to be willing to take the time. It's just
Okay.
like, is there a learning curve to it? Sure. And what I have my clients do is I like when we're looking at ingredients, I'll have them. So like if you can't pronounce it, don't eat it. But that's a general rule. But it's just like you can look it up, and you don't have to learn how to pronounce it. What you need to learn is like what it does to you with long-term exposure to it, whether you're ingesting it or putting it on your skin. 65%, if you can't eat your cosmetics, this is especially for women, and then you're putting a lot more lotions on their bodies also. If
Mhm.
you can't eat it, you shouldn't put it on your body, because 65% of what you put on your skin gets absorbed into your body, and it has to go to your liver to get rid of all those toxins. And when the liver can't do that and it gets overwhelmed, it stores them in blood, brain, bone, and fat. And it's just like, and ever since we have had like do it quicker, like the oversized, like how many ounces of like Pepsi or Coke can you possibly drink, and some people are. I have a female friend of mine that used to drink Mountain Dew every morning. I said, wow. I go, do you know what's in that? She goes, I don't want to hear it. And I said, yeah, but it says you need to hear it. You want to know why you got sick, 20 years later? And when she, we had a conversation about that. She goes, I was addicted to it. And people get
Yeah.
addicted to certain foods. And you have to just learn, like, am I going to, is this going to elevate my life? Is it going to improve my life? Then I'm not going to eat it. You have to be strong. You have to, muster up that strength to, like, to do something. Is it possible to eat something like, have, chips, for instance? We're having 4th of July very soon, right? So,
Right.
chips, for instance, well, it's just us, like, have a few, but be able to walk away from it. If you can't walk away from it, then don't eat it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so potato chips are one of my favorite things to go to. I can polish a big bag, but yes,
Yeah,
if
I
you
know we
can't
all
eat
can.
a handful of it, then let it go.
Right.
What do you recommend people grow in their little gardens next to their homes so they can supplement the diet?
Well, in a garden, I would tell people to grow tomatoes, lettuce, basil, thyme, rosemary. Um, some lady next door gave me cucumber plants, and I have them so the uh, so the Amazon guy can't throw a package at the front door, anymore. I have my cucumber plants growing along the railings going down.
Oh,
So, and but thyme and rosemary, thyme is really good. So if you ever start getting a cold, just get some fresh thyme and pull the
okay.
leaves off, and kind of like and mash them up, or just put a sprig in boiling hot water and drink that. And you have basil. Basil is really good in salads. Lemon balm is really good. You can use it just like you use parsley or some
Okay.
any other green. Chives are good, and they're easy to grow. But I like rosemary, because rosemary, if you create the bush, you can take it in during the wintertime, and it helps your immune system. It's a
Really?
good thing to
What
have.
does rosemary to do with your immune system? I know that.
It's aromatic, and so if you have, during, and oregano also. Oregano is really great. Oregano is powerful. It's an antibacterial, fungal. Rosemary is good for the air. It purifies the air.
Hmm.
So, and they're all really good. I mean, they're easy to find information about each one of them. But rosemary's like, and I love it because I can use it, in cooking with chicken. You can use it with meat. You can use it, um, you can make a. I have a diffuser, and I use the combination in the wintertime. I use Young Living, and Young Living, there's a link on my website for it. But you can use, in the wintertime, you can use rosemary and thyme, and I use a product that they have called Purification. And I also make sure I'm well stocked on thieves, because I have it in my car, I have it in my purse, and if I feel like a little tickle in the back of my throat, it's powerful because it has cinnamon in
Hmm.
it, and it's hot, a little bit on the hot side. But, you just take a couple drops inside your mouth, and you can put it in water if you want to, but I just take it straight. Um, and, it's just like, I have, it's just like that boosts my immune system all the time. If I want to get rid of, like, like any like odors that, 'cause some people are really sensitive to perfumes and things like that.
Yeah.
Purification is the perfect product for that to put in a diffuser and then help clean the air and get the other toxins out of out of that system, in that
Yeah.
environment, that ecosystem.
What kind of things can people do to preserve their back? We are only given one spine in the world. We're usually given two of a lot of different things, right? But we only get one liver, one pancreas, one spine, one nose, even though we got two nostrils. So what can we do to preserve the spine as you're a chiropractor? I have CP, so I went to a chiropractor for 18 years, and they did a lot of massage and a lot of adjustments, which has helped my back stay kind of straight because I have somewhat of a scoliosis because of all the muscles being tight on my left side. What kind of things can people do to go to a chiropractor and ask for to keep their posture? Because that's the biggest thing, right? Because we're always hunched over now because we're at the computer, or we're on the cell phone, and the only thing, my grandmom's 4'8", and she died when she was 102. She always stood straight up. These kids now are always hunched over because they're using this. So what can we do to keep a posture as a chiropractor?
Well, you see a chiropractor, number one. You can have an acupuncturist, number two. But for the spine portion of it, and to keep your spine healthy and moving, you need to, you need to balance out the physical, the mental, also the chemical, because one affects the other. You can eat something very poorly for you, and it can affect your spine because
Hmm.
of the nervous system, because the spine controls or the brain controls and coordinates all functions of the body, communicates to the body, protected in the spine, and then goes out to every organ, cell, and tissue. So if you eat something, it's going to make those nerves really irritated, and it's going to tell the spine, and the spine's going to tell the brain. I mean, in a very simplistic way. So, so you have to be really mindful about what you eat, what you think, and what you do. you
Hmm.
know and so if you and you have to like stop eating crappy food for starters. I mean, just stop it. It's just like, better. And if you know better, and you can think and feel and move, then you can make better decisions, and you make better decisions by eating well and also by moving. As if my second patient ever, my first patient was the granddaughter of this woman who we always called grandma, and she said, if you don't move, you're going to die. And that's the
Wow.
truth. So a lot of these kids, I mean, I had a kid that I did an exam on about a year and a half ago that couldn't bend over and get his hands below his knees and trying to touch the ground. Those
What
muscles,
is that?
those
Is that
muscles just
weight,
keep
or
on.
is that
No,
just
it's
how
just
you?
those muscles keep on getting short because they're not being used. If you don't move, she said, you're gonna die. Think about it.
Sure.
Stretch, reach for things. Like when I walk down the street, people stay away from me perfectly, and it makes me happy. I'm going down the street and I'm doing arms going backwards like this, and I'm doing circles, and then I'm doing breathing, touching my fingers like, and I pick a point to do that. I'm thinking about good things, because if you want good things to happen to you, you've got to stop the bad things. And how you stop that bad thought process is you tell it to stop. It's just like you have a lizard brain who's always going to pull you back into a protective mode. You have a mammalian brain that has everything that's ever happened to you, whether it's good or bad. And then you have your conscious brain. So the only way you're going to change how the communication goes, you have to handle the self-talk that you have with your lizard brain, who tells you you
Okay.
can't do it, you're not good enough, it's never going to work out. And you have to be able to shut it off. And the way you shut it off is that you tell yourself affirmations like, I am healthy, I am vital, I am active, I am successful human being. On this day, I'm going to do one, two, three, whatever it is. You say, and you put it in first person. It says, I'm not going to try. Trying indicates pick up your hand. If someone goes, try to pick your hand up. You either pick your hand up or you don't, but you don't
Hmm.
try because you do.
Right.
right? And so
Gotcha.
in that process, and if you start having that self-talk that controls the lizard brain that tells you you're not good enough, or like, see, I told you, this always happens to you, then what's going to happen is that it only feeds the lizard brain, and it goes like,
Mm,
yep, I'm right. It's just, but if you say like, oh, but I had a good experience one time, and it's just like, that was a good thing, and then you sit there and like, and the lizard brain goes, but, and you're going, shut up, knock him off your shoulder,
mm.
and then say to yourself, like, why is it do I choose to have good things happen to me? Why is it?
Because you have that outlook, right?
That I eat well, because you have to start the day with the ground running with like a positive thought, because more than likely it's going to end up on a positive note. And then people who are not on your same elevation, so to
Right.
speak. There's a woman where in an office that I go to that for consulting, and she said you're always so positive, and I said there isn't another choice. It's
Yep.
you choose to be miserable, and she just sat back like, with her hand on her chest, and she goes, "Are you telling me that I'm negative?" I said, "Absolutely." And I said, the shoe fits and you're wearing it. And I said, so every time you choose to spew something that's negative out there, you only attract more negativity. People wonder why they got a black cloud. I got a black cloud over me. It's just like you put it there.
Mm.
It's just like it's not going to go away unless you send it away. Somehow, some way, that black cloud's serving you, getting the attention that you think you need, you know, or, it's just like maybe the attention you need is to pay attention to yourself and create boundaries, you know,
Gotcha.
that kind of thing. But it's just so, I find it interesting, like that self talk, because if you look at marketing, it's just like in the old example of like, Hertz and Avis. Avis is
Yeah.
or Hertz was number one, but Avis was number two. It tried harder,
Right.
you know? And so it's
Always the
just like,
underdog.
yeah, but the underdog, people love underdogs to win,
Absolutely.
So look at the marketing that in the mammalian brain, goes like, oh man, I didn't lose. Like I'm an underdog, and I didn't win. But look at Avis has an opportunity to win. I can support them. And you don't really think about it in like that simplicity. It's just like there's more psychometrics that go on, in that kind of talk, to your, like, with yourself and for that. But I think it's interesting how people, it's just like, they go like, oh, I can never give up, like pasta. I go, what, did somebody have you tied up in a corner or something? They have you locked up in a room, And I said, you choose health.
Right.
Because if you choose health, then you have more of an opportunity to be able to express health. And you can't express health unless you're taking care of yourself. And if you really don't like yourself that much, I'm sorry. And it's just like, because then you can say, see, when someone tells you you can't do something, I love those kind of challenges. I don't like a 5-day challenge or a 75-day challenge. Those things that people sell, I'm not interested in them. But I like to have, like, it's just like, I challenge myself. It's just like, what can I do today to make my life better? And when I make my life better, I have the accessibility and the platform to make your life better.
Gotcha.
And I come from a point of knowledge and a point of experience. Make
So,
sense?
what have you done over the last 30 years in your practice to
Well,
convey positivity for the body and for health?
Well, what I have people do, I have people when they say something that I go like, I'm thinking, who told you that? Kind of feeling. There was a girl where I'm at, and a coin dropped on the ground, like 25 cents or something. And I said to her, and she just continued talking. And I said to her, "Are you going to pick it up?" And she said, "No." I said, "If I pick it up, it's mine. It's going to my back pocket." And she just looked at me, and I said, "Well, and I said, so if there's $100 bill on the ground, you're not going to pick it up? Suddenly, it's okay to pick up $100 bill, but not 25 cents, or even a penny."
Oh,
And
right.
I said, if you want to be a money magnet, you know, then you got to be open to doing that. She goes, oh no, my mother told me that people put poison on money that's on the ground, and they want you to pick it up so that you get sick. I was like, God bless this
Your
woman.
money has poison in your pocketbook too, then.
I did, well, what I said was like, okay, so, and I said, you didn't believe her, did you? I said, you did believe her. I said, and you walked by, like money on the ground, and I said, I ended up doing that, like, because anything that I found when I was out, I said I would just throw it in my car in this pot that I have money in for tolls and things like that. And when there used to pay money to park when I was in Boston. I used to have like 20, $30 in there all the time because
Wow.
I just kept on replenishing it. And I didn't think anything of it. It's just something that I did. And so and I said, so pick it up. I'm
Right.
waiting. And I waited till she picked it up. I said, did you die? No. And I said, do you wash your hands frequently? And she said, yes. And I said, then I go, we just disproved that theory, didn't we?
Right.
I was like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. But people get these belief systems from things that they saw or heard from their parents, and those are buried deep in that mammalian brain.
Hmm.
So it's just like I got a new job, and just like I kept it for 6 months and I got fired. Or the universe made it so, like one guy said to me, he said started the job of his dreams, and because he really liked helping people, and his first client, because he didn't have a second client, so I told him that the problem was is that you didn't have a backup, but his first client after working with him for 3 months, because it was for the elderly, and I said elderly people die, and this
Yeah.
person died, and so when he got to the house, he found this person dead in the house,
Well,
and so
it
which
happens.
really threw him for a loop. But he wasn't like in his bubble of like, this is such a cool job. It's just like, here's the reality about your job. And I said, so it's going to happen. And you did the appropriate thing. You called the police, you called the family up. I just got here, and it's just like, and then you need to like walk away from it, and so that you're protected. Is it shocking? Absolutely. But it's like you've got to thinking about like how did you like set yourself up to not get fired or have to wait for somebody else for you to get hired by. I go, you're not thinking ahead, and that and having when you have a practice, you don't treat one patient and hope for the best. You ask that patient to ask somebody else, do you know anybody else that I can help? I would love to help somebody else. Go out and tell that person to come in, right? And so that's and that's just like how I think about it. It's just like it's like you only have one life. You've got to like burn it, like you just like live it unapologetically. And if you really want to do it, and if you really want to have the best revenge against somebody, show them how well you can live your life.
Hmm.
You know,
Tell
do it
me a
even
time where
better.
you did that.
Hmm?
Tell me a time when you did that.
I do it all the time. It's just like I can't even tell you the like my when my father told me he was really against me being a chiropractor, and I just
Okay.
looked at him and I said to him like, he goes, well, you're going to be, because there were so many gas stations going under at that time. He goes, so you're going to end up in a gas station, like making it into a chiropractic office. And then what you're going to do is you're going to, it's just like you could be making like $12,000 a year. That was his number at the time. And,
No.
and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at him. I said, well, Dad, I go, as long as you have money, I said, in your bank account, you've got a refrigerator full of food, you got a roof over your head, you got a car that gets you every place that you need to go. I said, the only thing that I'm missing, I said, that tail that you're doing, being barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. I said, so, which he didn't like that comment, but but I just said to him, I go, you go and you do it, and I said, and I go, I'm not becoming a chiropractor because of the money. I'm becoming a chiropractor because it's a way of life that's a lot better than Western medicine. It's just I have people sometimes who come to me before they go to their medical doctor. What do you think I
Yeah.
should do? I'm very logical. I mean, people, my clients say the same thing. I'm very logical. For me, tell me what it is and how you want to move forward. And I'll tell you a safer, quicker, simpler solution to get there.
And probably
That's what
more
I do.
natural.
And you don't have that, I'm an out of the box thinker. So when someone says like, oh, you know, Dr. Pat, like, what do I do? I want to go to Europe, let's say that's like a destination, or I want to go to California. Anything that has to do with time zones, I go, you always leave when you more than likely are going to be sleeping anyway, because it's easier to fall asleep then. And
Hmm.
then when you get to where you're going, then you're able to get up. So, for instance, if you're going from the East Coast to like London or to Paris or to Rome or something like that, some of these flights get you at an ungodly hour of 6 o'clock in the morning. You can't get in your hotel room until 2 o'clock, in the afternoon.
Right,
So I
right.
bother getting there so early so you can walk around. What are you going to do with your luggage? And then you're tired, and then you're like, it's just like, so it leaves you much more vulnerable to like, I was like, I want to go take a shower. I want to change my clothes. I want to go out and I want to have something to eat. And I want to go, input, feed me the energy from here. you know and
Gotcha.
and I do that, even if I'm traveling in the States. I mean, I haven't been to New York City for years, and I mean years, more than 10. And I went this in January for a photo shoot. So I'm going, it'll be fun. I need some headshots anyway. So even if like I sign a contract with these people or not, it has to be really good in order for me to do that. I get off the bus because I'm up in the middle of the Finger Lakes. There is not
All right.
public transportation here, and you have to drive places and things like that. I took the Cornell bus in from
Okay.
Ithaca to New York. I was there in 3.5 hours. They let us off on 44th and 5th, basically, and
Yeah.
then you're right there. My hotel was 5 blocks away from there, 5 short blocks. I walked to the corner, and I just got there in the New York City libraries. There are these two beautiful statues of lions. I'm thinking, wow. I said, and I went input and and some guy was trying to decide between, it was so cold, some guys trying to decide, like the brown hat or the beige hat, or the burgundy hat or the black hat, whatever the three colors he was looking at. And I said, buy them all. I said, it's freezing. You might need to have to wear all three of them at the same time. And the guy said, you're going to give him a deal for that, right? And the guy that I rent from, he goes, when you go to New York, don't look at anybody in the eye. I said, I'm
No.
6 feet tall. Do you know how hard it is not to look somebody in the eye when you're 6 feet tall?
Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
I'm
I,
five,
I
five,
think,
five, so I'm a little
yeah.
shorter than you are. So I see everyone in mid height.
Yeah, but you have to. So it's just like you have to look up because you have to look where you're going, and
Yep.
you want to know where you're going because you want to be aware of your environment, so that if something's amiss, you're going to want to make a right-hand turn and jaywalk across the street. I mean, it's just like you need to be very involved in where your environment is at if you're in a large city, And I thought that
Absolutely.
was the most ludicrous recommendation, And I said, you're like, when you do that, you set yourself up to be a target. I'm not interested in
Yes.
being a target. I'm interested in participating. Not interested
Right.
in like, I'm not. I don't watch things from the sideline.
No.
And so you just go and do it, and you love the moment, and the moment will love you back, right? And you see something that interests you, go look at it, take a picture of it. And if you need to get, what I did is when I needed to get warm, I just walked in and went in one door and I walked out the other. When I
Okay.
was in the city, I did that when I lived in Boston all the time. It's just like when we had to walk through the city during the wintertime. I lived there for 10 years. And
Oh
I found
wow.
these pathways that go like cut through like major buildings. Now you probably get stopped and search when you go in them, but
Yeah, it's
right.
different.
But but you still have that mobility, or you go
Right.
underneath. It's just like, oh, I want to go to the Back Bay. I'm going to go. Okay, I'm not going to walk there. In the dead of winter, I can take the orange line and get off on the orange line or the red line, and then I can get, or green line. I mean, and then you get off at Copley and you go into the tunnel, and then you can walk through this mall and get over onto Boylston Street, and then like it's just like it saves you from freezing.
Oh,
And so
absolutely.
there's a lot of different choices. You just have to take a look at what they are, and you have to be adventurous, and just say today's going to be my day, and it's just like watch me.
So, what do you like better? Do you like urban, suburban, or rural living?
I like a combination.
Okay.
Right now when I was here at Christmas, Christmas got canceled for me because of all the snow and the that snow band up like between like around Buffalo, and
Okay.
and some places got 5 6 feet. And
Right.
where I was going to go, the guy didn't get dug out until Tuesday after
Oh, wow.
Christmas. And so if I would have got up there, I would have got stuck. And so I stayed here and decided, like, I'll go to Plan 2. No big deal. And that. So on Christmas Day, I went to go take a walk. And I went down, there's a hotel here. And I parked in the hotel. There's maybe 3 or 4 cars parked there. And
Mm.
so I walked one way, 1 mile, and I walked back. And that I didn't see one person or one car pass me the whole time.
Wow.
And I decided maybe I died, and this is my spirit walking around the town. So I walked inside the hotel and I said, "What year is it and what's today's date?" And the bartender that I know in there, she goes, "Christmas." And but we had a laugh about it, and I just said to her, I need more people, and and I like that energy. When I lived in Boston, it was great because I lived so close to the airport, and like flights then were like, I could get over to London for $300. So that's like, it was great in the good old days. Then but I like the hustle bustle of the city, but I never
Hmm.
want to be in a city of chaos hits,
No.
and I said that's craziness. And then being out too far also does not have its advantage. A week ago, a week ago, week and a half. This Thursday will be 2 weeks. I was there was an accident, so I took a shortcut that someone told me existed, and my car GPS decided to take me a different way
Hmm.
than the more direct route, and I ended up on this one lane back road, dirt road, and and I'm going, I can't turn around. There's no place to turn around. And
Right.
so I just kept on going forward. I'm going, this is all going to work out. So I get to this point where it starts to open up. I said, great, I can either turn around here, or it's like, oh, it looks like it continues going forward. So I went like maybe 20 more feet. The bridge was out.
Oh,
So I had to
those are
turn around.
nice.
So I had to turn around. So I turned around, no big deal. And maybe 3 minutes back up that same road I just came down, there was a huge tree down in front of my car.
Hmm.
And I went like, wow, I don't have a saw, I don't have a machete, and I don't have, a hatchet,
Hmm.
and I basically don't have anything except my bare hands to move stuff around. And we're
Right.
talking, the limb that broke was about maybe 8 to 12 inches from the tree
That's a
that
pretty
came
big
down,
limb.
and it was around 20 feet deep. And I said, wow, this is this is interesting. So I have this piece. I said, I got in my car and I looked at my car and I looked at, I said, I can dig a hole through the middle part of it. And so I started taking, limbs that there's one limb that I couldn't do something with. One of them I just turned and I got it up and over behind another tree. And I said, do not break while I'm still sitting here. And then, and then, and then I started taking the limbs off from the smaller ones at the ends and breaking them and throwing them to the side, and it's like my goal was to create a tunnel that I could drive through. And then there's one limb that it was like on an angle like this. So I just took it and I said, I can put this on top of this other limb that's already resting on a large limb of a tree across the way. It was like that. Well, so I went like, I can do this. So I had to sit on another limb in order to pick it up to put it over the top of that. And then I broke off all the extra things. But I like took, twigs and wrapped them around until they snapped, and moved stuff away, and I got through the first part. I'm going, this works, and then I had a little small break because the branches went like this. And I started working on the second one, and the second one had bigger limbs. So I weigh 150 pounds. I'm holding on to a limb above me, and I'm taking it and putting it on my weight. And I'm jumping on it till it cracked. So then when it cracked, I'm going, great, I can drive over that. And then took the extra limbs off, and I went back and I looked at my car and I'm looking at the hull and I said, I can drive through that now. And that's how I got out.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I thought it was the perfect place to murder somebody. you know, because no one's ever going to find you there and that.
Right.
And so, the question is people go like, wow, it's just like, weren't you scared? I was never scared. But what I didn't do is I didn't take a picture because my
No,
goal, I didn't care about the picture. I cared about being on the other side of that tree
absolutely.
that was down. And so then I had, and somebody said, I go, but the bigger question is, what did you learn? And it's just like I learned in the state of New York, I would never, ever, ever take a back road again. Ever.
Hmm.
I'll go the long way around instead of taking a back road because these back roads are real back roads and you never know who's living there. That was
That's true.
it was like, and it reminded me of like Deliverance. Dun, dun, dun,
Hmm.
dun, dun. It's like the first thing I thought of. I said, wow, and I'm looking around. I said, I didn't know what kind of wild animals were there. I didn't care, but I was going to get on the other side of that. And then, on the way going out, like I get that far, there's a guy walking with his two dogs. More closer to the end, I said, I just rolled my window down. I thought my mother's going to kill me from up in heaven. And I said, tell me, I said, there's cement up there, right? If I go straight, I don't turn left because there's a place to turn left just shortly up here. I go straight, right, and I'll hit cement. He said, you will. And I said, thank you very much. I said, where were you 45 minutes ago? That's like, and because I didn't think about yelling for help because there was nobody else around. That would have been
Absolutely.
absolutely useless. But at any rate, but we have like, it's just like our ability to solve problems, and that just tells you that I can solve a problem quickly, um, is there. We just don't tap into it. And so as long as you stay out of fear, then you can keep moving forward. And no matter what
Right.
happens, you got to keep moving forward anyway. But I
Yeah,
knew
you're
that
talking
night,
about the flight
yeah,
flight or flight response.
absolutely. The parasympathetic nervous system, either, and it's just like you want it to work when someone's pulling in front of your car,
Absolutely.
right? But you don't want it to work when you're thinking like, how the hell do I get on the other side of that tree?
Hmm.
And it's just like, when you start, going at it, I mean, I had dirt and mud literally all over me. But it's just like it was a good experience because I mean I've been in the back roads in Virginia. I never had that issue.
Oh,
You know,
really?
never. They're cleaner. They're
Okay.
better. They're better maintained. And at least there's signs when there's a bridge out. They tell you there's this.
Yeah, I mean that's the
That's,
you may have come across a county bridge. I used to work for the New Jersey DOT for
mhm.
6 years. So when a bridge is out and is on a state road or a federal road, usually they have markers. But when you have anything, a local road or a local bridge, you never know the condition of it.
Well, probably quite true. And you will never see me on a dirt road in the state of New York again. If
Well,
there's
at least not on a whim.
Well, it wasn't a whim. It was, it's just like there was it's just like it took me, I'm sure they cleared the road way before I got out of there. But
Oh,
it's just
okay.
like, and I could have walked across the bridge, if I was going to walk, but it was dark. It was 7 o'clock at night. It was going to start getting
Oh,
dark.
okay. Well,
So there,
that was one detail I didn't know. Okay, that
scary.
explains it.
So and or else, but there's nobody on the roads. I mean,
Yep.
you can't get it like and I didn't have a chainsaw that the fold up ones with the batteries, in it also. So it's just like I ordered a machete, a hatchet, and also a saw for my
Okay.
car. So I
I
just
guess
think
I guess now you won't ever leave without a
well, I'll
machete
go
or a
without one.
hatchet. You never know.
And it's just like, and I'm not a big camper, but I thought about it going, I said if I could figure out like if this car had a little more space, like in the, where the tires at, and I said I'd put the sleeping bag in here, but I have blankets in my car because I had dogs, so I
Gotcha.
have, those blankets are still there, but at any rate, we have to be able to be we have to be able to take care of ourselves in order to move forward. So whether it's something that you're eating, it's something that you're thinking. It's just like I could have been paralyzed by that incident, but I wasn't. I'm going like I'm not saying like I decided I'm not staying there, even though I just
Right.
went to Trader Joe's and I had food in my car because I was you couldn't count on somebody coming and finding you, and you
No.
had the other thing I didn't tell you is no cell service, zero. So
Oh well, yeah. If you're out in the country, you're not going to have cell service
right,
most likely.
but that's when someone like but around here you have cell service, but there
Okay.
you did not. And so I just went, I was really, I'm fortunate that, I'm very resourceful, and I'm
Gotcha.
fortunate in having a very resilient mindset. And I'm very fortunate that, I'm very healthy. So I have three really good things going for me, and I rely on those every day.
What things can someone take away from your career or your passion for health?
One woman asked me one day when she came in my office, she said, this is like years ago, and she said, "How do you do it?" That was her question, And I said, "What do you mean? How do you do it?" And she goes, "No, how do you do it?" She said, "Like, I heard that you're getting divorced." I said, "Really? Where'd you hear that at?" And so she, cause my personal life has nothing to do with my business life. I
Right.
kept them very separate. And she goes, "Oh, I was at the dentist." And I said, "Oh, what dentist were you at?" And I said, oh, the person who was cleaning the teeth, she told me, "What's her name? What's her first name?" So I just wrote it down, and I, knew the office, and I'm like, great. I said, "No problem." My question was, how could she possibly have known, right?
Right.
And so, but I had very high profile where I was at. The, but she goes, "So how do you do it?" And I said, "When I get up to go here to do something that I love to do," and I said, "My motivating force, my why, is that I know that I can improve your health." And I said, "And you're here because you know I can improve your health." So I get up every day, and I do something. I purposely do random acts of kindness. I purposely, if somebody's having a hard time, I stay with them a little bit longer, you know. And I said, I purposely, like, I do things with purpose and I'm solution driven. So,
Very good.
sometimes it's more than just an adjustment. Sometimes
Yep.
it's more than just, like doing kinesiology or, sometimes people just need to have that one person say, like, "Wow, that dress looks great on you today." It's just like, great shade of lipstick, and I said, matches your shoes. It's
There
just
you
like,
go.
you know, things like that, because some things, like, especially women need to hear that all the time. It's just like,
Validation. Yeah.
that because that's how we get validated, and that's how we can make your life a lot more easier when you validate us. And it goes a long way. It goes a long way both ways. And so, and that, and like being appreciative, people forget how to say thank you. Or like, that was really cool. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. And excuse me. And so, getting in that mode, I think that when she asked me that question, I said, "I just do it," and I said, she said, "Wow," and I said, "So you should just do it too." That was my last words to her. I've never seen her since then,
Oh,
and
okay.
and then shortly after that, I had a telephone call from the police department and asking me, since I was the last person to actually physically see her,
Hmm.
if I knew where she might be, which I did not. And so she decided to leave her husband,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
and I said, I said, "You got to take care of yourself."
Yeah.
And I said, "And if you don't take care of yourself, you can't expect somebody else to either."
No. A
So,
lot of people are trying to find happiness in someone else, and I've always discovered that you have to make yourself happy because
I'm
no one else can create your own happiness.
somebody asked me how, I can move someplace and not know a single soul, where I'm moving to. Like if I go like work in a doctor's office for a month, and I have people who like, along the whole Eastern Seaboard that, I've made friends with or stayed with, for a particular length of time, or in that area. And they're going like, I'm going to be coming through your area again, and then what they will ask is like, you're going to stay at our house, right? No, I'm going to stay in a hotel. But no, you're going to stay in our house. You can stay in a hotel. We're not talking to you anymore. And it's
Hmm.
just like, how long are you staying for? But I have like, have made these like friends along the whole Eastern Seaboard and even in Europe, when I used to go there a lot, that, some of them, you kind of like, oh my God, it's been 3 years I haven't talked to this person. Are they still alive? Kind of thing. But, it's just like I don't mind being by myself. I like me.
Okay.
And I think one of the things is that when you like yourself, because you can always look in the mirror going, oh, I don't like this, I don't like my neck, or like, oh, look at, I've got these like lines right here. It's just like, I see them, but do other people see them? Maybe, but not enough to going, oh my God, how did you get those lines? You know, and
Experience,
and it's
wisdom.
just like, no, say mine didn't wear glasses. Took my had my glasses when I was younger. I didn't wear them, so I squinted like this, and so it was just like my fault. But at any rate, we need to. We need to realize that. We need to like realize that it's okay to be by yourself. You don't have to have the TV on,
No.
in order to go to sleep. I stayed at a girlfriend's house one time. I woke up in the middle of the night. I thought she was getting murdered,
Hmm.
and I went flying down the steps because I'm just not scared by, like, I lived in the city. And, and I'm knocking on her bedroom door when I'm standing in her house, and I went, are you okay? She had a horror movie on that she fell asleep to,
Yeah.
but I could hear it. It was like loud and clear, like
Oh wow.
right through the vent. And I'm going like, oh my God. I said, turn that damn thing off and start. I go, well, listen to some meditation music or something, to go to sleep, but she had the TV on because she hated being by herself,
Hmm.
and it kept her company. And I said, well, at least watch something more positive than a horror movie.
Right. Well, we're coming on to 1 hour mark. So, what is your quote of the day,
My
and how can people reach you?
I've been psyched about this quote thing because when we talked about it before, when we were talking about doing this show, my quote is by JFK: "A rising tide lifts all boats," and and I like that quote because a boat can't rise in the tide if it's faulty, if there's something broken on it, if there's a hole. And I think the analogy of making us so whole and so full of peace of mind that nothing can disturb our peace of mind, and you can't ever sink me.
Yeah.
Whether it's the food that I eat, the thoughts that I have, the actions that I do, you can't sink me because I own my boat. And if I own my boat, I'm going to make sure that it's well manned, it's well equipped, and it's got all the tools there that I need to be successful. And so sometimes people need a reminder about what the tools are that are in their boats, and that's where I help people have that mindset that's, they're so strong that nothing can disturb their peace of mind, and then which makes them more successful and makes them more, um, you know quote unquote, for a bad word, productive, and what productive means to them, because if you can think it, you can have it. You just have to find the way.
Gotcha. How can people reach you, look you up, and then obviously book an appointment with you?
Well, they can reach me by looking at my website and checking my website out. There's some things under construction under it, but it's healthteamnetwork.com. I am on LinkedIn under the name exactly as you see it right here on the screen, Dr. Pat Boulogne, but it's all put together.
Gotcha.
And so if you put the name in LinkedIn, same for Facebook. Um, for my personal page, for my business page is Ask Dr. Pat, and that's the acronym for that. And on my webpage, there's numerous ways to make time with me by my calendar and have a conversation. Make sure that you mention Dave Powers here, like when, you're making an appointment, there's a place that you'll be able to like input some information so I know where you're coming from. That's helpful. And if you ever want to find out like what your health is, definitely message me at askdrpat@healthteamnetwork.com, and just say, assessments, and I send you 2 complimentary assessments that you can find out the health of your gut, your immediate 4 functions of your gut, and also how you're handling toxins in your environment, because you do not want those toxins in your body. They're deadly.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pat. We do appreciate you appearing on Yawning Health Tech. We are delighted to have you on as a guest. And would you like to come back?
Oh, I would love to come back, and I really enjoyed this.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank you for coming on, and we appreciate you and enjoy. People, remember, it's milestone to completion because everything that you do in your life, whether you think negative or positive, is a step forward. But remember, the past is the past, the present is something unknown. But remember, today is the present. Have a great day.
Thank you.